Speaking of marriage, how about these statistics? About 40% of kids are growing up with divorced parents, and a record-breaking 40% of babies born last year had unmarried parents.
It's so interesting, yeah. And if you are married or getting married, how about getting some marriage advice? How do you make it last? That's the big question always, right? Well, here to talk about it now, Rick Brown from the Institute of Relationship Therapy with some advice for us, because that is always the biggest question. I mean, maybe not so much for you because you're already in it to win it, but, you know, as a newbie, you're like, how do you make this last for years?
Right. Well, I think the most important thing is you have to find a way to continue to stay connected with each other, because that's the bottom line. If you're not really feeling connected with each other, you're going to find yourself arguing and fighting about really little stupid stuff.
And that goes back to communication, I would guess, in that point, right?
It is about communication, but it's not so much about what you say, it's how you talk about what you're talking about. So we have to find a safe way to communicate with each other so that we really hear each other in a way that we can begin to understand and then begin to have some connection with each other.
Okay, so that's the first tip. Learn how to communicate specifically with your partner.
That's right.
Okay.
But communicate safely. That is, to really be able to listen carefully to what they're saying. Pause before you react to it, and then listen more. And the more you listen to your partner, eventually you'll hear something that makes sense, because most of us don't really live with crazy partners. We may not like what they're saying, we may not agree with what they're saying, but can we communicate to them in such a way that they really do make sense? Because if we can communicate that, then you're going to feel more of an understanding and more of a connection with each other.
Okay, tip number 2 you were telling us is embrace change in your relationship.
Well, we're always changing. We live in a world of change, and we've got to be able to look at each other and say, maybe who you were back then is not who you are now, but can I begin to understand that shift? Can I begin to understand the differences that are going on with you? And if I take the time to listen to what is happening with you, I'll probably be in a better position to embrace it.
Last one here. One of the comments or quotes that I had heard a long time ago that I love: negative people make positive people sick. I love that, because it brings everybody down, and if you have a negative person inside the relationship, that can be toxic, can't it?
It can be. But, you know, at the same time, if we could begin to look at our partners not as our worst critic, but as our best consultant. That is, often what they're giving us is feedback about ourselves that other people experience, but it's usually the person who loves you the most is going to really tell you when you have that kind of gook on your face, if you will, that place that you really need to work on. And if you can find a way to take that in and to realize there's probably some truth to what they're saying, then you can begin to grow and really become more of the person you really want to be.
And you were saying earlier, it's all about being proactive in the process. Don't wait for the problem to arise later on and then deal with it. It's about showing each other affection every single day.
Well, that really helps. If you can find a way to interact with each other in a way that feels safe, in a way that feels empathic, you'll probably feel more connected, and that will help you continue further.
And how many times have you run into these couples who the kids finally get out off to college, and the couple's like, we haven't talked in 18 years. I mean, they don't know each other anymore because everything's wrapped up in the kids. How do you break that cycle early?
And that is where you really have to find a time for you two to get away, to be with each other, and not just everything be centered around the children. You have to find a way to be with one another in a way that feels very safe and very connecting.
That's when you take your second honeymoon.
That's right. You need it sometimes.
Because if you don't do that, you'll find yourself after 18 years wondering, what do we have to say to each other?
Yep. No, that's true. Rick Brown from the Institute of Relationship Therapy. Thanks, sir.